Fired by the millionaire boss's son. No one knew I was the owner of the company. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the steam rising from the industrial pots as Eleanor adjusted her immaculate white apron, as she did every morning for the past 32 years. Her silent steps through the corridors of Supreme Foods were as familiar as the walls themselves. The clock showed 5:30 a.m., and she was already at her post, preparing the breakfast that would feed hundreds of executives and employees of the country's largest food company. In the industrial kitchen, the stainless steel equipment reflected the fluorescent light as she coordinated her team with the precision of a conductor. Each of her gestures carried decades of experience. Each whispered order was received with absolute respect by the younger staff. Eleanor was more than a kitchen supervisor. She was the silent guardian of a routine that few appreciated, but without which nothing would function. "Miss Eleanor, the bread just arrived," announced Melissa, one of the newest assistants. Eleanor nodded, her hands already busy organizing the trays that would soon feed the first batch of employees. Her brown eyes, framed by gray strands that escaped from her cap, surveyed the kitchen with maternal attention. The buzz of the cafeteria began to grow as the first employees arrived for breakfast. From her strategic position, Eleanor observed the parade of expensive suits and high heels, conversations about targets and spreadsheets, while keeping everything running behind the scenes with the discretion that had always been her trademark. "We need to reinforce the coffee in the boardroom today," murmured Jack, her right-hand man for 15 years. "Looks like there's an important meeting." Eleanor just nodded, already anticipating the different movement. After so long, she could read the company's signals better than any market analyst. The day was proceeding in its usual routine when Eleanor noticed an unusual commotion in the hallway leading to the administrative area. Executives were moving, with hurried steps, whispering in groups. From experience, she knew that this type of movement usually preceded major changes. During her lunch break, sitting in her small office adjacent to the kitchen, Eleanor allowed herself a moment of reflection. Her eyes fell on the framed photo on her desk, herself much younger, next to Mr. Robert Mitchell, the founder of Supreme Foods. In the image, captured during the inauguration of the company's first industrial cafeteria, both smiled with genuine satisfaction. Mr. Mitchell had passed away a few months ago, leaving a void that went far beyond the corporate corridors. For Eleanor, it meant the loss of someone who, despite the social differences, had always treated her with respect and consideration. Frequent were the mornings when he would come down to the kitchen, taste the coffee and chat about the company, asking her opinion on various matters. "Miss Eleanor," Paula's voice, her administrative assistant, interrupted her thoughts. "HR. Just called. They requested your presence at a meeting at 2 p.m. in the boardroom." Eleanor felt a tightness in her chest. In 3 decades, she had never been called to a formal meeting in that room. As she organized the final details of the day's service, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. Her years of experience had taught her to read between the lines, to perceive the subtleties of corporate relationships. What she didn't know yet was that this day would mark not just a change in her life, but a turning point that would shake the very foundations of Supreme Foods. The 15th floor of Supreme Foods had always been foreign territory for Eleanor. The navy blue carpet muffled her steps as she walked down the mirrored corridor, feeling out of place in her white uniform amid the walls lined with fine wood. The contrast between this environment and her kitchen in the basement couldn't have been more evident. Upon reaching the boardroom's anteroom, Eleanor was greeted by a secretary who barely raised her eyes from the computer screen. "You can go. In there waiting," she said in a mechanical tone. Eleanor adjusted the bun of her gray hair and took a deep breath before pushing the heavy wooden door. The meeting room was an imposing environment, with an oval glass table surrounded by black leather chairs. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched like a concrete carpet beneath the afternoon sky. Around the table, serious faces observed her, some familiar, others completely unknown. "Mrs. Eleanor, please sit down," said a voice. She immediately recognized. It was Richard Mitchell, son of Mr. Robert and current CEO of the company. His tone was cold, different from the cordiality his father had always shown. Next to him, a man in an Italian suit was taking notes on a tablet with an unreadable expression. As you may know, Supreme Foods is going through a modernization process, Richard began, his fingers drumming on the glass table. After my MBA at Harvard, I identified several aspects of our operation that need to be updated to international standards. Eleanor remained silent, her hands resting on her lap, as Richard continued. We've decided to outsource the entire internal food service department. It's a global trend that will bring us more efficiency and cost reduction. The silence in the room was palpable. Eleanor noticed that some of those present avoided her gaze, while others observed her with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. A woman with gold-rimmed glasses pushed an envelope in her direction. "Here is your severance package," continued Richard, his tone bordering on boredom. "Our HR team will accompany you through the transition process. Of course, we guarantee all your rights and additional compensation for your years of service." Eleanor felt the weight of 3 decades of dedication crumbling upon her shoulders. Her hands, which had prepared countless meals in that company, now trembled slightly as they touched the envelope. However, her voice remained firm when she finally spoke. "May I ask a question, Mr. Richard?" The young executive made a dismissive gesture of agreement. "Do you remember what your father used to say about the value of people in the company?" The question seemed to catch Richard by surprise. For a moment, his face betrayed an expression of discomfort. "My father had his way of managing. But times have changed, Mrs. Eleanor. Business is business." Outside the room, a young marketing department intern, who was passing through the corridor at that moment, began to discreetly film the scene through the glass. The image of Eleanor in her white uniform, contrasting with the dark-suited executives, would be the spark for something much bigger than anyone could imagine. Eleanor stood up with dignity, the envelope untouched on the table. "I appreciate the opportunity I've had to serve Supreme Foods for all these years," she said, her calm voice masking the inner storm. "And I hope you find what you're looking for with these changes." As she left the room, Eleanor felt the executive's gazes on her back, but maintained the upright posture that had always characterized her. What no one there could imagine was that in her simple, synthetic leather purse, she carried a document that would completely change the course of that story. A yellowed paper, kept in absolute secrecy, which old Robert Mitchell had entrusted to her months before his passing, with specific instructions about when it should be revealed. The young intern's video went viral on social media with impressive speed. In less than 24 hours, the hashtag #JustJusticeForElena was already trending, accompanied by hundreds of testimonials from current and former employees of Supreme Foods. In her modest apartment in the suburbs, Eleanor watched in amazement. The repercussions on her old cell phone. Melissa, her former assistant, kept forwarding links to news stories and messages of support. Eleanor's face appeared on all major news portals, always contrasting her white uniform with the corporate environment that had rejected her. "Miss Eleanor, you need to see this," exclaimed her niece Patricia, a young journalism student, showing yet another viral video. It was a moving montage that gathered old photos of Eleanor at the company, including several moments alongside Mr. Robert Mitchell. "People are outraged by the way you were treated." The phone rang once more. It was Carol, the clerk who had been handling the Mitchell family's documents for decades. "Eleanor, I think the time has come," she said firmly. "Robert always knew this could happen. He made me promise I would keep the document until the right moment." Eleanor sighed, looking at the yellow folder she kept in her drawer. Inside it, Robert Mitchell's second will remained intact, protected by a sealed envelope. She had always known of its existence, but respected the old boss's wish to keep it secret. "I need time to think, Carol," replied Eleanor, her voice betraying the complexity of emotions she felt. "I don't want them to think I planned this." Meanwhile, at Supreme Foods, the atmosphere was tense. Richard Mitchell called an emergency meeting with the communications team, trying to control the damage to the company's image. However, each attempt to justify Eleanor's dismissal only worsened the situation on social media. "We need a stronger official statement," insisted the young CEO, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "Something that shows it was a purely administrative decision." "With all due respect, sir," intervened Lauren, the communications manager, "but people are more interested in her story than in our corporate justifications. Miss Eleanor worked here for 32 years. She served coffee to 3 generations of executives." In the room next door, a group of long-time employees were talking quietly about the old days. "Remember when she took care of the buffet for Mr. Robert's daughter's wedding?" commented a secretary. "He insisted it had to be her, said no one knew the family's taste better." Eleanor's story began to take on new dimensions as more people shared their memories. Former employees recounted how she had been more than a kitchen employee. She was an informal counselor, someone who knew every gear of the company from the inside. At her home, Eleanor received constant visits from journalists. Everyone wanted to know her story, to understand how a kitchen employee had gained so much respect over the years. She politely declined all interviews, maintaining the same discretion that had always characterized her. "Aunt, you need to defend yourself," insisted Patricia. "People want to hear your side of the story." Eleanor smiled serenely as she prepared coffee in the small kitchen of her apartment. The familiar aroma momentarily transported her back to the corridors of Supreme Foods. She remembered the long conversations with Robert Mitchell, the confidences exchanged in the quiet mornings, long before the executives arrived. "Patricia," she finally said, "sometimes silence speaks louder than any word." Her eyes fell on the yellow folder that held the secret capable of changing everything. "There are times when we need to wait for the right moment to act." That night, as the internet buzzed with her story, Eleanor made a decision. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Carol. "Come here early tomorrow. It's time to honor the trust that Mr. Robert placed in us." The morning dawned gray over the city when Carol arrived at Eleanor's apartment, carrying her own folder of documents. The two women had known each other for decades, united by the trust that Robert Mitchell had placed in both of them. Carol, as the family's official clerk, and Eleanor as the patriarch's silent confidant. "Are you sure?" asked Carol, her reading glasses reflecting the soft light coming through the window. Eleanor nodded, removing the sealed envelope from her drawer. The paper, yellowed by time, still maintained the intact seal, exactly as Robert had delivered. He knew this day would come," said Eleanor, her voice laden with memories. "The last time we talked, he told me, 'Eleanor, I trust you more than anyone with an international MBA.'" Carol smiled, remembering the peculiar wisdom of her old friend. Carefully, she opened her folder and removed a set of legal documents. "Robert registered this second will with me a year ago. He was very specific about the conditions for its revelation." The two women spent the entire morning reviewing the documents, organizing every detail according to the instructions left by Robert. The content of the will was surprising. In case of unjust dismissal or public humiliation, Eleanor would automatically become the majority shareholder of Supreme Foods. "He left everything legally well tied," explained Carol, pointing to the specific clauses, including a video recording of him explaining his reasons. Meanwhile, at Supreme Foods, Richard Mitchell was facing a new crisis. A group of international investors had cancelled an important meeting, citing the negative repercussions of the Eleanor case. The young CEO spent the morning trying to navigate the situation without success. "Sir," called his secretary, "there's one more thing. We've discovered that some employees are organizing a protest in front of the company." Richard ran his hands over his face, trying to maintain his composure. The empire his father had built was being shaken because of a simple kitchen employee. Or at least that's how he viewed her. Back at Eleanor's apartment, Patricia arrived with more news from social media. "Aunt, you won't believe it. Several companies in the food sector are speaking out, offering you employment." Eleanor smiled, but her thoughts were focused on the documents in front of her. "Patricia, dear, I don't think I'll need to look for a job," she said, exchanging a meaningful look with Carol. The two older women then began making calls. The first was to Dr. Alexander, a respected labor lawyer who had been a personal friend of Robert's. Next, they contacted a communications firm recommended by Patricia. "We're going to do this the right way," affirmed Eleanor, her voice firm. "No spectacles, no revenge. Just justice, as Mr. Robert would want." In the late afternoon, as the sun set over the city, Eleanor looked out the window of her apartment one last time before leaving for the meeting with the lawyers. On the kitchen table, she left the white apron she had worn for so many years, carefully ironed and folded. "You know, Carol," she said, adjusting the new blazer that Patricia had insisted she buy, "Mr. Robert always said that a company isn't made of walls and machines, but of people and their stories." Carol smiled, storing the documents in her folder. "And now you're going to tell your story, Eleanor. No longer from behind the scenes, but from center stage." The two women left the apartment, carrying not only documents, but the weight of a responsibility that would forever change the destiny of Supreme Foods. In Eleanor's bag, besides the will, there was a small notebook where, over the years, she had noted all her ideas to improve the company. Ideas that now finally would have a chance to be heard. The morning was clear when the black car parked in front of Supreme Foods. Eleanor stepped out of the vehicle, accompanied by Dr. Alexander and a small legal team. Her navy blue business attire replaced the familiar white uniform, but her posture remained the same, dignified and serene. The main lobby, once a place she crossed discreetly, now seemed different. The security guard, John, the same one who days ago had escorted her to the back exit, remained motionless, his eyes wide at the transformation. Eleanor greeted him with a gentle smile, as she had always done. "Miss Eleanor," he whispered, slightly, inclining his head in respect. The buzz in the lobby grew as other employees recognized her. Cell phones, discreetly pointed in her direction, recorded each step of that historic return. In the panoramic elevator, rising toward the 15th floor, Eleanor observed the city through the glass. "Are you all right?" asked Dr. Alexander, noticing her moment of contemplation. "I am," she replied, adjusting the folder she carried. "Just thinking about how Mr. Robert loved this view. He used to say that from here he could see not only the city, but the future." When they reached the meeting room, they found Richard Mitchell and the board in the midst of discussing the company's image crisis. The young CEO visibly paled upon seeing Eleanor enter, accompanied by the lawyers. "What does this mean?" he questioned, rising abruptly. "Security." "That won't be necessary," intervened Dr. Alexander, his voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Eleanor has every right to be here. In fact, she has more right than anyone in this room." With precise gestures, Eleanor and her team began distributing copies of the documents across the meeting table. The will, the powers of attorney, the notarized records, everything meticulously organized, just as she had always done in the kitchen. "Is this some kind of joke?" Richard laughed nervously, leafing through the papers. His laughter died in his throat upon recognizing his father's signature. "No, Richard," replied Eleanor, for the first time using just his first name. "Your father left very clear instructions. In case of my unjust dismissal, I would automatically become the majority shareholder of Supreme Foods." The silence that followed was deafening. The directors exchanged stunned looks, while their hands trembled holding the documents that rewrote the company's history. "But why?" stammered Richard, collapsing into his chair. Eleanor walked to the window, the same place where she had so often conversed with Robert Mitchell about the company's future. "Your father believed that a company is not made only of numbers and spreadsheets, but of people. For 32 years, I was more than a kitchen employee. I was an advisor, confidant, and primarily guardian of the values he cherished so much." Dr. Alexander then projected a video on the room's screen. It was Robert Mitchell, recorded months before his passing, explaining his reasons. "Eleanor knows this company like no one else. She watched each department grow, knows every employee, understands every process. More than that, she embodies the values I've always advocated: honesty, dedication, and respect for each person who is part of this business family." As the video continued, Eleanor observed the reactions around her. Some of the older directors nodded in understanding, Others seemed to still be processing the reversal. Richard remained silent, his previous arrogance replaced by an expression of defeat. "I don't intend to revolutionize everything overnight," announced Eleanor, her serene voice echoing through the room. "But some changes are necessary, starting with the appreciation of those who, like me, have dedicated their lives to this company." At that moment, as if to underline her words, sounds of applause began to echo from outside. Dozens of employees had gathered in the corridor, applauding through the glass walls. Among them, Jack, Melissa, and the entire kitchen team, still in their white uniforms, smiled proudly at their former supervisor. Eleanor smiled back, feeling the weight of the responsibility she now carried. It wasn't just about her or about revenge. It was about justice and preserving Robert Mitchell's true legacy, and she was just getting started. The days following the revelation of the will were intense at Supreme Foods. Eleanor, now occupying the office that had once belonged to Robert Mitchell, maintained the same simplicity as always, just transferred to a new setting. The first thing she did was place a coffee maker in the room, not a modern capsule machine, but a traditional one that filled the environment with the familiar aroma of drip coffee. "Ma'am, you don't need to make your own coffee anymore," suggested the new secretary, still adapting to her boss's unique style. "Some things shouldn't change," replied Eleanor, pouring a cup for herself. "It's while preparing coffee that I have my best ideas." And ideas were plentiful. With the help of a hand-picked consulting team, Eleanor began implementing subtle but significant changes. The first was the creation of a program to recognize long-time employees, acknowledging the experience accumulated over the years. On a particularly busy morning, Eleanor received an unexpected visit. Lauren, the communications manager who had tried to defend her cause during the crisis, knocked on the door with a concerned expression. "Miss Eleanor, we need to talk about something delicate," she began, placing a folder on the desk. "We found some irregular documents." Carefully, Lauren presented evidence of inflated contracts and shell companies, all approved during Richard's brief management. Eleanor examined the papers attentively, her face maintaining its characteristic serenity. "That explains the rush to remove me," she murmured, connecting the dots. "Richard was trying to cover his tracks." The news spread quickly through the company's corridors. Richard, who still maintained a position on the board for legal reasons, began to orchestrate a counter-offensive. Rumors of his attempt to sell part of the company to foreign investors began to circulate. "We need to act with wisdom," advised Dr. Alexander during an emergency meeting. "We have enough evidence for a lawsuit, but that could harm the company's image." Eleanor served coffee to everyone present, a gesture that now carried a different meaning. "We don't want to destroy, we want to build," she said, sitting at the head of the table. "Mr. Robert always said that a company is like a recipe. The secret is in the balance of ingredients." She then presented her plan. Instead of publicly exposing the irregularities, she proposed a complete restructuring of the administrative board, making room for new talent, especially those who, like her, knew the company from the inside out. "Jack," she called, surprising everyone by inviting her former kitchen assistant to the room, "please present your cafeteria optimization project." With confidence, Jack exposed a detailed analysis of costs and processes, demonstrating a deep knowledge that went far beyond pots and pans. His presentation made clear why Eleanor had always valued the practical wisdom of her employees so much. "See," she explained to the directors, "while some consultants spent millions on spreadsheets, Jack developed a system that reduces waste by 40% without sacrificing quality." At the end of the day, as the last rays of sunlight tinted the office golden, Eleanor received another visit. It was Carol, bringing important new information about Richard's attempt to sabotage the transition. "He's spreading rumors among the employees," revealed the clerk, "trying to create divisions, saying you're going to transform the company into a cooperative." Eleanor smiled, serving coffee for her friend. "You know, Carol, I've learned something important over all these years. The truth, like good coffee, needs time to be appreciated in its fullness." Taking her old notebook of ideas, Eleanor began to outline her next action. It wouldn't be a response to Richard's attacks, but rather a plan to transform the old industrial kitchen into something much larger, a center for innovation and professional development. The old industrial kitchen at Supreme Foods was buzzing with a different energy that morning. Where once there were only industrial ovens and pots, now stood modern counters and state-of-the-art equipment. Eleanor walked through the transforming space, personally supervising every detail of the renovation that would convert the location into the new Food Innovation Center. "Miss Eleanor, the engineers brought the final plans for your approval," announced Melissa, now promoted to Special Projects Coordinator. The young woman who had started as a kitchen assistant demonstrated a natural talent for management, confirming Eleanor's vision about the hidden potential in her former subordinates. "The product development laboratory will be here," explained Eleanor, pointing to a spacious area. "I want it to be a transparent environment with glass walls. People need to see the creation process happening." News of the kitchen's transformation quickly spread through the company, generating various reactions. While many employees celebrated the innovative initiative, a group associated with Richard continued trying to undermine the credibility of the changes. "She'll ruin the company's tradition," some executives whispered in the corridors. "Transform a simple kitchen into a research center? That's madness." Eleanor, however, remained firm in her purpose. During a meeting with the development team, she presented her old notebook, where for years she had recorded ideas for new products and processes. "Look at this recipe," she said, showing a yellowed page. "I developed this line of gluten-free products 5 years ago when I noticed the increasing demand for healthier options. Mr. Robert loved the idea, but at the time, we didn't have the structure to implement it." Lauren, the communications manager, who was attending the meeting, couldn't contain her enthusiasm. "Miss Eleanor, that's exactly what the market is asking for now. We could develop a complete line of products focused on conscious eating." The Innovation Center project quickly began to take shape. Eleanor made sure to hire nutritionists, food engineers, and sustainability specialists, but also kept several employees from the old kitchen in strategic positions. "Practical experience is as valuable as academic knowledge," she explained during hiring interviews. "We need people who understand not only the theory, but also the reality of day-to-day production." Amid the transformations, an especially significant moment occurred when Eleanor gathered the entire team for a special breakfast. On the menu, besides traditional options, was a selection of products developed from her old recipes. "These gluten-free breads," she explained, proudly serving, "were made following the recipe I developed years ago. But now, with the proper equipment and the expertise of our new team, we were able to perfect the formula even more." The success was instantaneous. The employees not only approved the new products, but began suggesting improvements and variations. The collaborative environment that Eleanor had always dreamed of was beginning to become a reality. At the end of that day, as she observed the sunset through the new glass walls of the Innovation Center, Eleanor received an unexpected call. It was an important media outlet, interested in doing a report on the transformation of the old kitchen. "They want to tell your story, Miss Eleanor," insisted Patricia, her niece, who now worked in the company's communications department. "Show how you're revolutionizing the food sector from the inside out." Eleanor smiled, adjusting the new white lab coat that replaced her old uniform. "It's not my story, Patricia. It's the story of everyone who believed that a kitchen could be much more than a place to prepare food. It could be a place of transformation." News of the transformation of the kitchen into a food innovation center didn't please everyone. In a private room of a luxurious restaurant downtown, Richard Mitchell was meeting with a select group of foreign investors. The heir, still unhappy with the loss of control of the company, was plotting his counter-offensive. "The situation is temporary," he assured the potential buyers. "Eleanor has 90 days to prove her management capability according to the will. After that, we can legally contest her position." What Richard didn't know was that among the restaurant's waiters was Peter, Jack's nephew, who immediately informed his uncle about the suspicious conversation. The information reached Eleanor through her network of loyal contacts, built over decades of coexistence. They are planning a systematic sabotage, explained Dr. Alexander, after analyzing the information. The idea is to create operational problems that will hinder your management during the probationary period. Eleanor remained calm, serving coffee to her trusted team gathered in her office. Mr. Robert always said that problems are like difficult recipes. We need patience and attention to detail to solve them. In the following weeks, seemingly isolated incidents began to happen. An important shipment of raw materials was mysteriously delayed. Computerized systems experienced inexplicable failures. Traditional suppliers began receiving tempting offers from competitors. "Miss Eleanor," called Melissa one day, visibly concerned, "we've discovered that someone is trying to access our product development database." The attempt at industrial espionage was the last straw. Eleanor called an extraordinary board meeting, including Richard. In the meeting room, now remodeled with more welcoming furniture, she personally served coffee to each person present, a gesture that carried decades of meaning. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice serene but firm, "I have here evidence of all the sabotage attempts from the last few weeks, including," she made a significant pause, "records of meetings with foreign investors without board approval." Richard paled when Eleanor projected photos, documents, and conversation records on the screen. His arrogant expression gave way to visible discomfort. "I didn't come here to accuse or punish," continued Eleanor. "I came to propose a choice. We can continue this game of sabotage and counterattacks, or we can work together for the future of the company your father built with so much love." The silence in the room was palpable. Eleanor then presented her newest project, a mentoring program where experienced executives would work side by side with employees of different levels, sharing knowledge in both directions. "Richard," she addressed the young man directly, "you have an MBA from Harvard and valuable knowledge about international markets. Why not share that expertise with our team? In exchange, you could learn from those who know every detail of the operation." The proposal caught everyone by surprise. Some of the older board members began nodding in approval. Richard himself seemed disconcerted by the unexpected approach. "Your father believed in the power of collaboration," concluded Eleanor. "He knew that a company is only truly strong when everyone grows together." At the end of the meeting, as the board members left, Richard remained seated, contemplating his coffee cup. Eleanor approached him with a folder. "I found this in the old archives," she said gently. "These are your father's notes about your first years at the company. He was so proud when you decided to study business administration." That night, alone in her office, Eleanor received another confirmation that she was on the right path. The Innovation Center had just approved its first product, developed entirely under the new management. A line of functional foods that combined cutting-edge technology with traditional recipes. The Food Innovation Center was in full activity when Eleanor received surprising news. An important business magazine had chosen Supreme Foods as a case study in corporate transformation. The article highlighted not only the structural changes, but mainly the silent revolution in corporate culture. "Miss Eleanor," called Patricia, entering the room excitedly, "the reporter wants to do a complete profile about you. She was fascinated by your story." Eleanor smiled, observing through the window the movement in the company's courtyard. Employees from different departments were having informal conversations during the coffee break, a scene that would have been unthinkable a few months ago. "You know, Patricia," she replied, adjusting her reading glasses, "interesting stories happen here every day. Look down there." Through the glass, they could see Richard Mitchell talking with a group of employees from the old kitchen. After the last board meeting, he had surprisingly agreed to participate in the mentoring program, although he still maintained a certain reserve. "He's different in the last few weeks," commented Melissa, who had just entered the room with some spreadsheets. "Yesterday, he spent 2 hours with the development team discussing export possibilities for the new products." The cross-mentoring program was producing unexpected results. Executives who previously barely set foot on the factory floor now actively participated in operational discussions. On the other hand, production line employees contributed valuable insights to management. "Miss Eleanor," called Lauren, the communications manager, rushing into the room. "We need your approval for the launch of the new social project." Eleanor took the documents, carefully analyzing each detail of the professional training institute that was about to be inaugurated. The project, one of her first initiatives as president, had a special meaning. It would bear the name of Mrs. Josephine, a former colleague who had been unjustly dismissed years ago. "The institute will offer free professional courses," explained Eleanor to the assembled team. "But not just in the food area. We want to train people in management, technology, marketing, areas that were traditionally restricted to those who could afford an expensive education." The initiative had already attracted important partners. Universities offered professors, companies in the sector promised internships, and even competitors showed interest in participating in the project. "This goes far beyond Supreme Foods," continued Eleanor, serving coffee to everyone. "We're creating a model of social transformation through education and work." At that moment, Jack entered the room with an excited expression. "Miss Eleanor, the first class of the product development course just presented their projects. You need to see this." In the Innovation Center's laboratory, 15 students, all employees from different sectors of the company, were presenting their creations. Among them was Mary, a cleaning assistant who had developed a line of vegan desserts using typical American ingredients. "This pudding," explained Mary with confidence, "uses traditional techniques I learned from my grandmother, but adapted to meet the needs of today's market." Eleanor observed everything with tear-filled eyes. She remembered her own notes in the old notebook, the ideas that for years had remained stored waiting for an opportunity. "The true asset of a company," she said to those present, "is not in its buildings or machines. It's in the potential of people who, many times, just need a chance to shine." At the end of the day, as she organized her desk to leave, Eleanor received an unexpected visit. It was Richard carrying an old folder. "I found this in my father's personal archive," he said, placing the folder on the desk. "They're projects he wanted to implement. Many of them look like what you're doing now." Eleanor opened the folder carefully. Inside, she found documents detailing plans for a research and development center, training programs, and even a social institute. In the margins of the papers, handwritten notes revealed Robert Mitchell's dream of transforming the company into something bigger than a simple business. The office was quiet that afternoon when Eleanor and Richard pored over the documents found in Robert Mitchell's archive. Each page revealed a bit more of the vision the former president had for the company, a vision surprisingly aligned with the changes Eleanor had been implementing. "He planned all this years ago," murmured Richard, his voice betraying a mixture of admiration and regret. "And I never realized. I was too busy trying to prove my worth with numbers and spreadsheets." Eleanor served 2 cups of coffee that she herself had prepared, a habit she refused to abandon even as president. "Your father was a man who saw beyond the obvious, Richard. He knew that a company isn't made just of financial results." As they talked, a movement in the courtyard caught their attention. A group of employees from the Professional Training Institute was giving an outdoor presentation, demonstrating new products developed during the course. "Shall we go down to see?" suggested Eleanor, noticing the interest in Richard's gaze. In the courtyard, they found a science fair atmosphere. Booths had been set up where students were presenting their creations. Among them was John, the former security guard who now participated in the product development program. "Mr. Richard, Miss Eleanor," greeted John proudly. "I want to show you something I developed inspired by the conversations I had with your father, Mr. Richard." John presented a sustainable packaging system that combined food safety with environmental responsibility. His knowledge in security, added to the courses at the Institute, had resulted in a significant innovation. "Impressive," admitted Richard, examining the prototype. "My father always stopped to chat with you at the security booth, didn't he?" "Yes, sir," replied John, smiling. "He used to say that security wasn't just about watching, but about knowing and valuing people." The afternoon progressed as Eleanor and Richard continued visiting the booths. In each presentation, stories about Robert Mitchell naturally emerged, advice given here, a word of encouragement there. The portrait that formed was of a leader who had planted seeds of transformation long before his departure. "Miss Eleanor?" called Melissa, approaching with some documents. The preliminary results from the last quarter just arrived. The numbers were surprising. Despite the initial costs of the changes, the company showed growth in strategic areas. The Innovation Center had already generated 5 patents, and the products developed with employee participation showed excellent market acceptance. "This proves it's possible to grow while doing the right thing," commented Eleanor, passing the reports to Richard. "Your father always knew this." Richard studied the numbers in silence for a few minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. "We need to talk about something, Miss Eleanor, about the foreign investors." He then revealed details of the negotiations he had initiated before the management change. Preliminary contracts, merger proposals, restructuring plans. Everything was put on the table with an honesty that surprised Eleanor. "I want to undo this," he declared. "Not because I'm forced to, but because I finally understand what my father, and you always saw the real value of this company is in its people." Eleanor smiled, remembering the long conversations with Robert Mitchell about the company's future. "You know, Richard, your father had a saying, 'In life, as in the kitchen, the best results come when we mix the right ingredients in the right measure.'" That night, after everyone had gone home, Eleanor remained in her office, looking out the window at the city lighting up. On her desk, the old notebook of ideas was open to a new page where she was, beginning to sketch the next steps of a transformation that was just beginning. The auditorium at Supreme Foods was packed that special morning. It was graduation day for the first class of the Professional Training Institute. On stage, Eleanor watched with pride the 60 graduates, each representing a story of transformation. Among those present was Carol, the clerk who had faithfully kept Robert Mitchell's will. Beside her, Patricia filmed everything for the documentary. She was producing about the company's transformation. "Today we celebrate not just the completion of a course," Eleanor began in her speech. "We celebrate the realization of a dream that began a long time ago in this company's kitchen, between pots and conversations with a man who believed in people's potential." In the front row, Richard watched the ceremony with an expression different from the arrogance that had previously characterized him. In recent weeks, he had actively involved himself with the Institute, offering classes on international management and sharing his experiences abroad. "Among our graduates," continued Eleanor, "we have Mary, who started as a cleaning assistant, and today is one of those responsible for developing our line of vegan products. We have John, who transformed his security experience into innovations for our packaging. And we have so many others who prove that talent and capability don't depend on title or position." The most emotional moment of the ceremony was when Jack took the stage to receive his certificate. The former kitchen assistant was now director of the Food Innovation Center, leading a team that mixed PhD scientists with professionals trained through practical experience. "I remember the day when Miss Eleanor found me experimenting with ingredient combinations after hours," he recounted at the microphone. "Instead of reprimanding me, she sat with me, and we started noting the ideas in that famous notebook of hers." The mention of the notebook drew smiles from those present. The object had become almost a legend in the company, symbolizing how great ideas could be born from the most unlikely places. After the ceremony, during the reception in the new communal space, which was once just a segregated cafeteria, Eleanor observed the groups that naturally formed. Executives chatted animatedly with production workers, sharing ideas and experiences without the hierarchical barriers of before. Miss Eleanor called Lauren, the communications manager, approaching with a tablet in her hands. "The response on social media is incredible. People are sharing their stories with the hashtag Supreme Transformation." Indeed, the company's transformation had become a case study at important business schools. The management model that integrated practical experience with formal knowledge was inspiring other organizations to review their structures. "You know what's most interesting?" commented Richard, joining the conversation. "Our productivity indices have increased by 40% since we started these changes, and it wasn't through pressure or abusive goals, but through real engagement." Eleanor smiled, remembering Robert Mitchell's words, Your father always said that when people work with their hearts, the numbers are a consequence. At the end of the day, as she organized her office, Eleanor found an old photo among the documents. In it, she stood beside Robert Mitchell, in the old kitchen, both smiling as they tasted a new recipe. In the margin of the photo, a note in his handwriting said, "The true taste of success is in the mixture of competence with humanity." At that moment, Melissa rushed into the room. "Miss Eleanor, the evaluation committee has arrived for the final 90-day audit." Eleanor carefully put away the photo and adjusted her blazer. It was time to prove that the transformation wasn't just a passing dream, but a new model of doing business, where corporate success and human development walked hand in hand. The audit committee, consisting of 3 experienced independent consultants, set up in a specially prepared room on the 14th floor. For a week, they would have unrestricted access to all documents, numbers, and employees of Supreme Foods to evaluate the results of Eleanor's 90 days of management. "They've already started the interviews with the employees," informed Dr. Alexander, entering Eleanor's office on the morning of the 2nd day. "And they seem particularly interested in the Innovation Center." Eleanor maintained her normal routine, including her morning ritual of preparing coffee. "We have nothing to hide," she replied, serving a cup to her lawyer. "Every change we made is documented and well-founded." The audit team delved deep into the analysis. They interviewed employees at all levels, from the production line to the board of directors. They examined contracts, financial statements, and even the company's social media. The transformation process was under total scrutiny. "They were impressed with the institute," commented Patricia, who had accompanied one of the visits. "Especially when they discovered we already have 3 patents registered by students from the first class." On the 3rd day of the audit, a tense moment arose when the auditors requested an emergency meeting with Eleanor and Richard. In the meeting room, the committee leader, Dr. Silverman, a gentleman with grey hair and a serious expression, went straight to the point. "We found some inconsistencies in the contracts prior to your management, Mrs. Eleanor, contracts that could seriously compromise the company." Richard paled, but before he could speak, Eleanor intervened. "Yes, Dr. Silverman, we are aware of these irregularities and have already initiated a process of reviewing and regularizing all contracts." She then presented a detailed report showing how each problematic contract was being renegotiated or terminated in a transparent manner. "Our priority was to correct the errors without causing harm to the company or to business partners." The auditor leafed through the report with growing interest. "Impressive," he murmured. "You not only identified the problems, but found solutions that benefit all parties." That night, after another long day of auditing, Eleanor found Richard, alone in the old kitchen, now part of the Innovation Center. He was sitting on one of the benches, looking at a photo of his father on the wall. "You know, Miss Eleanor," he said without turning around, "I spent years trying to prove I could be better than my father. Only now do I understand that he never wanted me to be better. He wanted me to be more human." Eleanor sat beside him, the familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the environment. "Your father had a saying, 'In life as in the kitchen, there's no mistake that can't be fixed with honesty and goodwill.'" On the last day of the audit, the committee gathered all the main stakeholders for the final presentation. The auditorium was tense when Dr. Silverman took the floor. "In 30 years of career," he began, "I have never seen such a profound and successful transformation in such a short time. Supreme Foods has not only met all the goals established in the will, but has created a new paradigm of business management. The numbers presented were impressive: increased productivity, reduced operational costs, improved employee satisfaction indices, and, mainly, innovation in products and processes. But the most remarkable thing," continued the auditor, "is how this transformation was achieved, not through cuts and pressure, but through appreciation and human development." When the meeting ended, Eleanor remained seated for a moment, absorbing everything. Her position as president was officially confirmed, but she knew the work was just beginning. There was still much to be done, many lives to be transformed. The official confirmation of Eleanor's presidency brought a wave of renewal to Supreme Foods. What was once an experimental project now became a definitive management model. In the first board meeting after the audit, Eleanor presented her vision for the company's future. "We cannot stop here," she declared, distributing folders with her new 5-year plan. "The Professional Training Institute will be expanded to other regions of the country, starting with locations where we have branches." Richard, now officially the International Expansion Director, complimented the presentation. "We've already received invitations from 3 Latin American countries to implement similar models in their operations." The news that most excited those present was the announcement of the creation of the Supreme Incubator, a space within the Innovation Center dedicated to startups focused on sustainable food and food technology. "We want to be more than a food company," explained Eleanor. "We want to be a transformation center for the food sector as a whole." Lauren, who now held the position of Communications and Social Responsibility Director, presented the first results of a pilot project carried out in underprivileged communities. The Cooking and Citizenship Program has already trained 50 micro-entrepreneurs in the food sector. During the presentation, Eleanor noticed Jack making detailed notes. Her former kitchen assistant had become one of the most respected executives in the company, combining practical knowledge with an innovative management vision. "Miss Eleanor," he called after the meeting, "I need to show you something special." In the Innovation Center laboratory, a team of young scientists, blending institute graduates with traditional researchers, had developed a revolutionary process for food waste utilization. "This technology can reduce waste throughout our production chain," explained one of the researchers, a former cleaning assistant who had stood out in the training program. Eleanor observed everything with a discreet smile, remembering her own notes in the old notebook about waste reduction. Sometimes, she thought, we just need to give opportunity for ideas to flourish. The afternoon brought a special surprise. A group of employees had organized a small celebration in the communal space. The place, which was once the segregated cafeteria, was now a vibrant environment where all hierarchies naturally mixed. "Miss Eleanor," called Mary, now the vegan product development coordinator, "we made something special for today." She presented a reinterpretation of the first product that Eleanor had developed in her time as a cook, a functional bread that now incorporated sustainable ingredients and advanced nutritional technology. "The original flavor is there," commented Eleanor after tasting it, "but now with even more purpose." Richard, who was observing the scene, approached with an envelope in his hands. "I found more old photos in my father's archive," he said, "including this one." The photograph showed Eleanor and Robert Mitchell on the day of the inauguration of the company's first industrial kitchen. On the back, a note said, "With Eleanor, I learned that leadership is not about being at the top, but about elevating everyone around you." At the end of that day, as she organized her desk, Eleanor received an interesting call. It was the dean of an important university, inviting her to give a masterclass on business transformation and humanized leadership. "You have become an example for the new generation of administrators," explained the dean. "We want our students to understand that business success and social responsibility are not mutually exclusive concepts." Eleanor accepted the invitation but made a suggestion. "I would like to bring some of our employees to share their stories. The true lesson is in the journey of each one of them." Before leaving the office, Eleanor made her last round of the day through the Innovation Center. In the laboratory, some lights were still on. A team continued working on a new project, driven not by obligation, but by passion for what they were doing. The university auditorium was full when Eleanor took the stage for her masterclass. By her side, a diverse selection of employees from Supreme Foods prepared to share their transformation stories. Among those present, executives from other companies took notes, interested in reproducing the successful model. "True innovation," began Eleanor, "doesn't come from large investments or expensive technologies. It comes from recognizing human potential at all levels of the organization." In the front row, Richard listened attentively. In recent weeks, he had become one of the greatest advocates of the new management model, presenting the results at international conferences. Mary, the former cleaning assistant, now leader of the vegan products sector, shared her story. "When I entered the company, my only contact with food was cleaning the kitchen. Today, I lead a team that develops products exported to 5 countries. The impact of the testimonies was visible on the faces of the students and executives present. Stories of transformation followed one after another, each demonstrating how investment in people could generate extraordinary results. Jack presented the numbers from the Innovation Center. In the last quarter, we registered 12 new patents. 8 of them came from ideas from employees who, until recently, had no active voice in the company. During the break, Eleanor was approached by several business people interested in learning more about the program. One of them, president of a large supermarket chain, was direct. "How much would you charge to implement this model in our company?" "It's not something you can buy or simply copy," replied Eleanor with a gentle smile. "It's a change in mindset that starts at the top and needs to be genuine." Back at Supreme Foods, a new initiative was taking shape. The Professional Training Institute had established partnerships with public schools, bringing knowledge about healthy eating and entrepreneurship to young people from underprivileged communities. "We need to think about the next generation," explained Eleanor during a board meeting, "not just in training professionals, but in awakening dreams and showing paths." Lauren presented the preliminary results of the program. "We already have 50 young people participating in the pilot project. 3 of them have developed apps for optimizing processes in the industrial kitchen." The transformation of Supreme Foods had become a case study in business sustainability, not just for the environmental part, with its initiatives for waste, reduction and eco-friendly packaging, but mainly for the social aspect. "Profit remains important," explained Eleanor to a group of investors, "but it is a consequence of a job well done, not the only objective." In her office, Eleanor kept a special board, a collage of photos showing the company's evolution, from the old industrial kitchen to the modern innovation center. Each image told a part of the transformation story. Miss Eleanor, called Patricia, entering with news. The documentary about the company has been selected for an international corporate cinema festival. The news was another confirmation that the story of Supreme Foods transcended the business world. It was an example of how the appreciation of the human being could transform not just a company, but an entire chain of relationships. That night, after another intense day, Eleanor found Richard at the Innovation Center's cafe. He was studying some reports while savoring one of the new products developed by the team. "You know, Miss Eleanor," he said, "the other day I found an old article about my father. He said that his biggest dream was to create a company that was more than a business. That was a school of life." Eleanor smiled, serving coffee for both. "And that's exactly what we're building, Richard. A company that not only produces food, but feeds dreams and transforms lives." A busy morning began at Supreme Foods with the arrival of an international delegation. Representatives from companies from various countries had come to see up close the management model that was revolutionizing the food sector. Eleanor, in her discreet blue blazer, personally conducted the tour of the facilities. "The secret isn't in the physical structure," she explained as they crossed the Innovation Center, "but in the people who give life to this space." In the main laboratory, Mary coordinated a mixed team of scientists and former kitchen employees in the development of a new product line. The integration between academic knowledge and practical experience had become the company's trademark. "This sauce," explained Mary to the visitors, "was born from a traditional recipe of Mrs. Charlotte, who worked for 20 years in our kitchen. We adapted it with cutting-edge technology, but maintained the artisanal essence." The visitors were particularly impressed with the Professional Training Institute. In the classroom, a young professor, a former maintenance assistant who had graduated in food engineering, was explaining complex concepts of biotechnology to an attentive class. 70% of our instructors are former students of the Institute, commented Jack, who was accompanying the group. "They perfectly understand the transformation journey because they lived it." During lunch, served in the renovated communal space, Richard presented the financial results of the last semester. The numbers showed sustainable growth, with emphasis On the product line developed by the employees themselves, our talent retention rate has reached 95%, he explained. And the most interesting part, we've received 3 times more job applications since our story became known. Eleanor observed everything with discreet satisfaction, remembering her own journey. In a corner of the room, she noticed a new employee making notes in a notebook similar to her old companion of ideas. Some traditions deserve to be maintained, she thought, smiling. In the afternoon, a surprise awaited the group in the auditorium. The students of the latest institute class had prepared a special presentation, a project to expand the program to rural communities. "We want to bring knowledge and opportunities to small producers," explained a young graduate. "Just as Supreme has transformed us, we want to transform other lives." The proposal was bold. Create training centers in agricultural regions, connecting local producers with technology and markets. The project had already attracted the interest of cooperatives and local governments. "This goes beyond our walls," commented Eleanor to Richard. "It's exactly what your father always dreamed of." At the end of the day, as the international delegation was saying goodbye, a Japanese executive made a comment that deeply touched Eleanor. "You haven't just created a successful company, you've created a social transformation movement." Back in her office, Eleanor found a surprise on her desk. It was a newly published book on humanized management, and in the dedication, a special message from its author. "To Eleanor, who taught us that the true legacy of a company is not measured in financial statements but in transformed lives." And flipping through the book, she found her story told as a case study in transformative leadership. But what moved her most was seeing the stories of her employees also recorded there, each of them a living example of how opportunities and trust could change destinies. Night was falling when Eleanor finally prepared to leave. On the way to the parking lot, she stopped at the old kitchen, now part of the Innovation Center. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee still hung in the air. Some things never changed, and didn't need to change. The sun had not yet risen when Eleanor arrived at Supreme Foods that special morning. It was the inauguration day of the first rural training center, an extension of the Professional Training Institute in a small town in the countryside. "The buses are already arriving with the rural producers," informed Melissa, who had coordinated all the logistics of the event. Many of them never imagined they could be part of a project like this. The center had been built on an old farm, maintaining the original architecture, but equipping it with cutting-edge technology. In the classrooms, modern microscopes shared space with traditional agricultural tools. "The goal is to create a bridge between traditional knowledge and innovation," explained Eleanor to a team of journalists. "We don't want to replace the farmer's knowledge, we want to enhance it." Richard, who had enthusiastically supported the project, was leading a group of investors through the location. "Each product developed here already has a purchase guarantee from Supreme Foods, as long as it meets our quality and sustainability standards." During the inauguration ceremony, moving stories followed one another. Mrs. Thompson, a 65-year-old farmer, took the stage to tell how the pilot program had transformed her small property. "Before, I only planted corn as I learned from my parents," she said with tears in her eyes. "Now I develop organic products that are sold as far as the capital." The most touching moment came when a group of young farmers presented their first creation, a line of products that combined native ingredients with modern processing techniques. "This sauce," explained one of them, "uses a pepper that only exists in our region, but now with the knowledge we've acquired, we can preserve its flavor and properties in a professional way." Eleanor observed everything with a serene smile. Her old notebook of ideas, now digitized and transformed into an innovation database, had inspired many of the methodologies used at the center. "Miss Eleanor," called a familiar voice. It was John, the ex-security guard who now led the sustainable packaging sector. "You need to see this." In the center's laboratory, a team of farmers and scientists was working on a revolutionary project, biodegradable packaging made from agricultural residues. "This isn't just environmental sustainability," explained John. "It's social sustainability. Each material used here generates income for local families." The day progressed with more surprises. Lauren presented the results of a social impact study. The project had already directly affected more than 200 families, with the prospect of reaching 1,000 by the end of the year. But the most impressive number, she highlighted, is that of young people who decided to stay in rural areas after learning about the project. Family succession, which was a serious problem, has begun to reverse. At the end of the afternoon, as the last visitors were saying goodbye, Eleanor found Richard contemplating the sunset from the center's veranda. "You know, Miss Eleanor," he said, "yesterday I dreamed about my father. He was here talking with the farmers, tasting their products, exactly as he used to do when he visited our old kitchen." Eleanor smiled, remembering the countless conversations with Robert Mitchell about the company's future. "Your father always said that a company shouldn't just grow, it should flourish. And to flourish, it needs to be rooted in people's lives." Before leaving, Eleanor made one last stop at the center's experimental kitchen. There, traditional products were being reinvented with modern techniques, but maintaining their original essence. It was the perfect materialization of her philosophy: evolve without losing roots. It was a special morning at Supreme Foods. The Innovation Center was decorated for the graduation ceremony of another class from the Institute, but this time there was something different in the air. Eleanor had gathered the entire board for an important announcement. "After 2 years of intense dedication," she began, her voice serene as always, "the time has come to start a new phase in our journey." The meeting room was in complete silence. Richard, who in recent months had become a true partner in the company's transformation, observed Eleanor with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "I've decided it's time to prepare the next generation of leaders," she continued. "I'm going to create a governance council and gradually pass the executive management to those who have grown with our changes." The news caught everyone by surprise. Mary, now Product Innovation Director, was the first to speak up. "But Miss Eleanor, you are the soul of this transformation process." Eleanor smiled, serving coffee to everyone as she always did in important moments. "True transformation doesn't depend on one person," she replied. "It depends on solid values and principles, which are now rooted in each of you." Eleanor's plan was meticulous, as everything she did. The Governance Council would be formed by a balanced mixture of experienced executives and young talents who had emerged during the transformation process. "Richard," she called, "I would like you to lead the Innovation and International Expansion Committee. Your global vision, now aligned with our humanized values, will be fundamental." The young executive, so different from the arrogant heir who had fired Eleanor 2 years before, nodded with visible emotion. "It will be an honor to continue the legacy that you and my father built." During the afternoon, while the graduation was happening in the auditorium, Eleanor walked through the company's corridors, observing how each space had its own transformation story. In the old kitchen, now a modern research laboratory, young scientists worked side by side with masters of traditional cuisine. "Miss Eleanor," called Jack, showing some documents. The numbers from the last quarter arrived. The rural training center is already impacting more than 1,000 families, and sustainable production has grown by 200%. But it wasn't the numbers that made Eleanor most proud. It was seeing how people had transformed, how each employee, from the humblest to the most senior, now felt part of something bigger. The true asset of a company, she used to say, is not in its buildings or machines, but in the sparkle in the eyes of those who work in it. At the end of the day, after the graduation ceremony, Eleanor met with the new executive board. They were familiar faces: Mary, Jack, John, people who had grown with the company and were now ready to lead. "You are living proof that talent and capability don't depend on origin or title," she said. "Each of you carries not only technical knowledge, but the essence of what we built together." Lauren, presenting the communication plan for the transition, highlighted how the story of Supreme Foods had become a global case study in business transformation. "It's not just a story of corporate success," she explained. "It's an example of how humanity and efficiency can walk together." Before ending the meeting, Eleanor opened her inseparable notebook of ideas. now more a symbol than a working tool. "Here," she said, showing a recent page, "is the project that will occupy my time from now on." It was an ambitious plan to expand the social transformation model to other companies and sectors, creating a network of organizations committed to human development. The sun was rising over the city when Eleanor arrived at Supreme Foods that special morning. It was her first official day as chair of the Governance Council, leaving the executive management in the hands of the new generation of leaders she had helped to form. "Good morning, Miss Eleanor," greeted the young security guard at the entrance, one of the new employees who had already absorbed the culture of respect and cordiality that now permeated the company. In the lobby, a photo exhibition told the story of Supreme Foods' transformation. From the old industrial kitchen to the modern innovation center, each image narrated a chapter of that extraordinary journey. "You changed everything," commented Patricia, who now directed the institutional communications department. "Not just the company, but the lives of so many people." Eleanor smiled, discreetly adjusting her blazer. "It wasn't me, Patricia. It was all the people who believed that change was possible. I just opened some doors." The first meeting of the new Governance Council was scheduled for that morning. In the modernized room, which still maintained the familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee, Eleanor proudly observed the new leaders taking their places. Mary, now CEO, presented the plans for the next year: expansion of the Rural Training Center to 3 new states, international partnerships for social technology transfer, and an ambitious research project in sustainable food. "And there's one more piece of news," announced Richard, his face lit up with a genuine smile. "The development program that Miss Eleanor created has been selected by the UN as a model of sustainable business transformation." The news was received with enthusiastic applause. Eleanor, in her corner, observed how each person in that room represented a story of overcoming and growth. After the meeting, she made her last official walk through the various sectors of the company. In the Innovation Center, a new class of researchers, mixing PhDs and practical professionals, was developing products that combined tradition and technology. "Miss Eleanor," called John, now Sustainability Director, "you need to see this." In the laboratory, a team had just finalized a revolutionary project: completely biodegradable packaging developed in partnership with rural communities. At the Professional Training Institute, the classrooms were full. Through the glass walls, Eleanor could see people of all ages and backgrounds sharing knowledge and dreams. "You know what's most beautiful?" commented Jack, walking beside her. "Each person here already has a project to help other people when they graduate." The late afternoon, Eleanor gathered all employees in the auditorium for her last message as an executive. The space was packed, with people even watching via video conference from the branches. "When I entered this company more than 30 years ago, I was just a cook with a notebook of ideas," she began. "Today, I bid farewell to executive management, not as a boss, but as someone who had the privilege of seeing dreams turn into reality." Her voice, serene as always, echoed throughout the auditorium. "The true legacy of Supreme Foods is not in the buildings we've constructed or the products we've developed. It's in each of you, in the certainty that talent and capability know no barriers when there is opportunity and respect." Before closing, Eleanor made one last announcement. Her old notebook of ideas would be transformed into a book, not just telling her story, but mainly highlighting the transformation stories of all employees. "Because each of you," she concluded, "is a special chapter of this story that will continue to be written with the same dedication and humanity that brought us here." A year had passed since Eleanor assumed the presidency of the Governance Council. Supreme Foods was no longer just a food company, but a symbol of social transformation that inspired organizations around the world. That special morning, Eleanor crossed the company lobby, observing the new digital panels that showed in real time the social impact of Supreme's projects. Impressive numbers jumped out. More than 5,000 families benefited by the rural centers, 300 new entrepreneurs trained by the Institute, and an innovation network that spread across 3 continents. "Miss Eleanor," called Mary, Now a respected CEO in the market, the UN representatives have arrived for the international certification. In the meeting room, the UN audit team was impressed with the results. Supreme Foods' Human Development Program had exceeded all expectations, becoming a global reference in corporate social responsibility. The most impressive thing, commented the delegation leader, is how you managed to balance economic growth with genuine social development. Richard, who coordinated the international expansion, presented the numbers from the last year. 40% growth in revenue, 60% reduction in employee turnover, and an innovation index that placed the company among the most advanced in the sector. But it's not just the numbers that make us proud, he explained. It's seeing how each person here has become the protagonist of their own story. During lunch served in the communal space, Eleanor observed with satisfaction how hierarchies had naturally dissolved. Executives, workers, and interns shared the same tables, exchanging ideas and experiences. Miss Eleanor, approached Jack with a smile on his lips, remember when you found me experimenting with recipes after hours? Who would have thought we'd be here today? In the afternoon, an exciting surprise awaited Eleanor. The team had organized a special exhibition at the Innovation Center, Seeds of Transformation, the story of a silent revolution. The exhibition told not just the story of Supreme Foods, but mainly the personal stories of transformation. Photographs, video testimonials, and significant objects narrated a journey of change that had begun in the kitchen and reached the world. In a special panel, Eleanor's old notebook of ideas had been digitized and transformed into an interactive installation. Visitors could virtually flip through its pages, discovering how simple ideas had transformed into revolutionary projects. The most beautiful thing, commented Patricia, observing the visitors, is that each person who passes through here leaves inspired to make changes in their own environment. At the end of that afternoon, Eleanor met with a special group, the first graduates from the Institute who now held leadership positions in different companies. Each of them carried their own notebook of ideas, keeping alive the tradition she had started. You are the proof, she said, serving coffee for everyone, that transformation is a continuous process. Each of you is now an agent of change, carrying forward this philosophy of humanized management. Lauren, who was documenting everything for the company's historical archive, noticed something significant. Miss Eleanor, have you realized that today marks exactly 2 years since that meeting where they fired you? Eleanor smiled, looking out the window at the sunset that was tinting the sky golden. Time is an interesting teacher, she replied. Sometimes we need to take a step back to leap forward. At that moment, as if to underline her words, a group of young apprentices passed through the corridor, carrying prototypes of new products developed in the laboratory. Their eyes shone with the same passion that Eleanor had seen so many times in the mirror during her journey. Morning was particularly bright when Eleanor arrived at Supreme Foods for a special day. It was the inauguration of the Transformation Museum, a space dedicated to preserving and sharing the story of change that had revolutionized not just a company, but an entire way of thinking about business management. The building, constructed where the old industrial kitchen once stood, blended modern elements with details that recalled the company's origins. Right at the entrance, a replica of the first kitchen had been recreated, with the familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee welcoming visitors. Every detail was designed to tell our story, explained Mary to the guests. Not just the story of Supreme Foods, but the story of all the people who were part of this transformation. The museum was organized into different thematic sections. In the Seeds of Change area, Eleanor's old notebook occupied a prominent place, its digitized pages allowing visitors to explore the evolution of the ideas that transformed the company. Richard conducted a group of international business people through the exhibition. What you see here is not just a case of business success, it's a living example of how humanity and efficiency can and should walk together. In the Fruits of Knowledge section, video testimonials showed the stories of dozens of employees who had grown with the company. John, the ex-security guard who became sustainability director, was moved to see his trajectory portrayed there. The most important thing, he explained to visitors, is that each story here has inspired other stories. It's a cycle that keeps growing. The Rural Training Center was now connected to the museum through live broadcasts, showing in real time how communities continued to transform. Farmers who once struggled to survive were now successful entrepreneurs, maintaining their roots while embracing innovation. "Miss Eleanor," called Patricia, "it's time for your speech." In the packed auditorium, Eleanor took the stage with the same simplicity as always. Her discreet blue blazer contrasted with the sparkle in her eyes as she saw so many familiar faces in the audience. "When I started at this company, more than 3 decades ago, I had only a notebook and many dreams," she began. "Today, I look at each of you and see thousands of notebooks, thousands of dreams, all turning into reality." Eleanor's words echoed through the auditorium as images of the company's transformation were projected on the screen. The true legacy is not in this building, nor in the impressive numbers we've achieved. It's in the sparkle in the eyes of each person who discovered their own value, who found their voice and their place in the world. Richard stood up to deliver. A surprise to Eleanor, a special edition of the book that gathered the company's transformation stories, with a preface written by himself. "This book," he said emotionally, "is dedicated to 2 people who taught us the true meaning of leadership. My father and you, Miss Eleanor." At the end of the ceremony, as the guests explored the museum, Eleanor found a moment of quietude in the replica of the old kitchen. The aroma of coffee brought back memories of so many moments lived there. "You know, Miss Eleanor," said Jack, approaching with 2 cups of coffee, "you always said that transformation is like a good recipe. It needs the right ingredients, adequate time, and, mainly, a lot of love." Eleanor smiled, accepting the coffee. Through the window, she could see the company courtyard where dozens of young apprentices were gathering.